This is episode 39 of the Women in Depth podcast. The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Marilyn Steele, who will be talking to us about the wild feminine. In this inspiring and moving conversation, you will hear Dr. Steele describe what the wild feminine is, why it matters, and how we as women lose sight of this very important and necessary part of ourselves. Dr. Steele will also discuss fears and misperceptions about the wild feminine and the connection between the wild feminine and the earth. The insights from this conversation will help you reflect upon this very important question, captured in this quote from a poem by Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Dr. Marilyn Steele is a Jungian psychologist, author, speaker, shamanic dreamer, and mentor to primetime women. She works with visionary entrepreneurs and transformational leaders who yearn for greater access to their feminine power, their wild feminine souls, and a path to bring their wild wisdom into the world. Marilyn teaches widely on the essential role of women and the archetypal, dynamic, transformative feminine in the evolution of consciousness, a revisioning of the self, and ecology of leadership. Hi, Marilyn, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you today.
I am so grateful that you have taken the time to share your wisdom with our audience. Could you start off by sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. And I think it's so current to talk about the wild feminine when we look at what's happening to the earth and what's happening to women. And I can look back now and see the journey, the path that my life has taken, and see what an absolute blessing it was to grow up in Hawaii, which was completely a fluke for my family. My father just had a friend. It was kind of a lark for him to take this job in Hawaii. But I then had the gift of growing up basically as an indigenous person. So even though I am Caucasian, I really feel like in my bones and in my cells, really in the blood of me, I know what it's like to be part of the earth, to be connected to the ocean. I feel the movement of the waves. I feel the wind. I know that I'm not separate from the earth and that we are vast cosmos universes within. So I never lost that feeling of being connected to nature because of growing in Hawaii, and also in the tradition and the religion and the songs and the dancing. It's a very embodied, ancient wisdom that shows up in their legends and their stories and the history, where the sacred feminine is central and core and equally balanced with the sacred masculine. So it's one of the few places on earth where the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, I mean, it's part of goddess spirituality, but it's really earth-based spirituality. It's knowing that we are part of the earth, because we do, we come from the stars. We have stardust in our bones, and we look at the earth we look at the world through seawater. So we are earth, but I call her the wild feminine, and in Jungian terms, the archetype is known as the dynamic transformative feminine, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but basically, it's knowing that we are wild, that we are part of the earth, that we have universes within, that we are creators, and we have the spark of the divine. So all of that, I got to learn through my feet. By the way, I didn't wear shoes until I was in the 6th grade. So my feet were really, really on the earth. And I was swimming by the age of 3 in the ocean, in Mother Ocean. I know. It was just a beautiful, beautiful beginning and childhood. So my body really is tuned in. Of course, it's a little harder here living in the city. And I do get to Hawaii as often as I can. It's my soul home. We all have a place in the earth, or maybe several, where our soul feels completely at home and can be rejuvenated. And Hawaii is like that for me. But anyway, I carry Hawaii within me. And that's where so much of my purpose in life and my soul assignment was born.
So for our listeners who may not be familiar with some of the terms we're using, may not know anything about depth or Jungian psychology.
Yes.
Marilyn, could you speak a little bit more to, I guess, first of all, just to kind of keep things in smaller chunks for our listeners, what is the wild feminine and why does it matter?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think I should define archetype because the wild feminine is an archetype. It's within each of us, but we have our personal lives. We know who we are as people, and then we live within a culture. That's kind of the second layer in context, a society, a culture with shared ideas and beliefs. And then deeper than that is the area of what Jung called the collective unconscious. It's like a matrix or a field of archetypes. And that is deep, deep wisdom, and it is shared universally. And we all know this, and we can contact it in our dreams, which we do every night. So in our dreams, we are connecting to this field that is below consciousness. We don't quite know it. But, some of the archetypes that people are very familiar with without maybe knowing the terminology. And Jung was not a simple speaker. He used very alchemical and Sanskrit and oh my gosh. So it's hard to kind of translate him. But we all have the archetype of the mother. So we have a personal mother, but we also have an idea, a belief, a whole feeling about mother, and Mother Earth or the divine child. We were children, we love children, but there's also this archetype of the divine child who's a creator and playful and comes from God, and we know that. So it's kind of a broader, deeper idea. Now, my shorthand for Jung's term dynamic, transformative feminine, which is an archetype, is the wild feminine. I just like it better. It's shorter. It means something that is native to us. It's our native genius. It's women who are free and unleashed, and they have the freedom to be themselves and to express themselves. It's kind of woman unleashed, And this archetype of the wild feminine is the one that we as a culture and in the world are the least familiar with, because we understand the mother and we either respect and honor her or maybe despise her or fear her, but we understand the idea of Mother Earth, our own mother. Who is this? And in Jung's terms, that's called the static feminine. And she is the all-embracing. You can think of her as a big, big, large woman with her arms out, and she includes everybody. That's mother love. That's static. That's inclusive. So that's an idea of the feminine that we're pretty familiar with. And he had ideas, of course, of the masculine. And there's the static masculine who's like the king, who has the rules and the laws, or the dynamic masculine who's the warrior, who's going out slaying dragons and, running marathons and being linear. Well, there's also a dynamic feminine, and she's the one who's not just loving and kind and related, who is the mother archetype. We kind of know that idea of feminine, and actually, to tell you the truth, it holds some of us back. This idea that we're supposed to be always compassionate, always kind, always forgiving, always interested in the relationship, and often very self-sacrificing. So we are not just those loving women. We are also wild women. So this is why I'm so focused on bringing the dynamic and transformative. That's another mouthful, but it just means a change maker. Because the change is going to come from us being creative, being fierce, being playful, but taking it on ourselves to take the lead and stand up and say what we really believe is important and that we will fight for it. So we see this in the movement, and it's an archetype, by the way, that is coming to the surface, and we're beginning to see it all around the world. You know, did you watch the women's marches around the world at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Well, this is exactly what is happening. It's coming up from the archetypal collective unconscious, but here it is to the surface in the world. I mean, there were over 5 million, there were almost 6 million women throughout the world who showed up with those silly little pink pussy hats. But what we did, and this is very much in the area of the wild feminine, we took a word, pussy, which was used long before the president used it in such degrading ways. But it's always been a word that's kind of dirty and degrading and points to a way in which we're supposed to be ashamed of being women. And women around the world, and I still get goosebumps when I think about how this happened, they began to use this word, claim this word, own this word as a way of reclaiming our power, and done in this very, what looks kind of silly, you know, those hats. At least that was my first thought. But then when I looked at the sea of women, the millions of women wearing these hats, I was just moved to tears. So the wild feminine is very original. She's using what I call her wild genius or her wild medicine, and we all have it. It's buried deep in our soul, but we all come to this earth, and I think at this time, if you're here living through these times, boy, there is something for you to do to change the course of history. You're one of the creators, and you are one of the leaders and contributors, and that includes being as small as a hummingbird and bringing your drop of water to the forest fire that is raging throughout the world, or whether you have a big dream. It doesn't matter. You have something to offer. And with these pussy hats, we kind of stood together. And this is very important, too, that I want to talk about. The wild feminine is not so much a personal journey now. It's much more a journey in community. It's reclaiming our wildness, which means our power, our fierceness, which has been kind of reined in or leashed in, or we've been shamed by it. So wearing these hats, it's like, you know what? You can't use that word to shame me. It's not dirty. In fact, I'm going to say it right out loud, and I'm going to write it in my emails, and I'm going to speak it. And it has, so that's another part of this archetype that is new, is it doesn't have to be so deadly serious, you know, even though the task at hand in the world does look quite serious and deadly serious, and despair is going to be there. But we have humor, we have each other, we have our dreams, which come from that deep place, and we have mystery, and we have magic. And we can make something else happen. So it is being wild. Wild is one of those words, you know, that also was kind of derogatory about women. It's like, I know when I first started using this word, colleagues would look at me and go, "Oh, Marilyn, you can't use that word. That sounds like you're talking about women at a wet t-shirt contest or something, you know, being wild and crazy." So I am claiming this like, no. This is wild, meaning in our natural state, connected to the earth, coming from the stars. So we've got both, you know, the upper connection and the deeply, deeply rooted connection. And we are speaking from that very ancient wisdom, which the earth has always had, but we are reaching for the stars and we are making a new story. So that's wild to be free in that way. And when we get rid of the shame, which has been projected on us, and the guilt for wanting something different and wanting to make a different story in the world, when we're free to do that, we are wild women. And gosh, there are just more and more of us every day, which gives me great hope these times.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were speaking is I wanted to ask you to share, you know, how do women become disconnected from their wild selves, or how do we lose sight of this part of ourselves? And then the other question that I was also thinking was, what are the misperceptions or fears or myths about the wild feminine. And you were really kind of speaking to both, because I think in many ways, the misperceptions, for example, the misperception of a wild woman and what that means is actually one of the ways that women can become disconnected from their feminine selves because of the messages about what that means. And also as I'm thinking of your words, I'm thinking expansion, awakening, and it's really expanding and revisioning what it means to be a woman, how it's embodied. Because I think also that, one of the things that came up, you were talking about, with these marches around the world and women standing in solidarity. One of the things that I feel gets in the way with women and community is this competition where women, women can have a tendency to not be open and welcoming with women. And so that's also a shift that I feel. So those are just my thoughts. And I just welcome you to jump in and share anything that you'd like to add to that.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. You've put your finger on several of the real core issues about this, and those are just perfectly beautiful questions. And I have a million things that are going on in my mind how to answer it. So, because it's so important. It's so important. And yes, we can look at our individual stories, our family, our ethnicity, what point in history, and see where we got shut down and shut up and shamed for being too big. So that word expansion and awakening, that's exactly the movement within us and within the world that I'm talking about. That's so true. It's being bigger. And we were taught and shamed for wanting to be bigger and taught that we needed to be smaller. And if we were not, if we were outspoken, if we were bold, if we were adventurous, if we were competitive athletes, and I'm speaking for myself there was a great deal of punishment, the threat of loss of love, just being ashamed, oh, you're kind of too much, you're too big for your britches. So there were very many ways that we would hear about how dangerous really it was, how dangerous it was to want more or want a bigger life or a more adventurous life. And although it might have come from our mothers or our fathers and the community at large, it also is within us, because it wouldn't be able to find a foothold if we didn't somewhere in our ancient memory remember that we were burned at the stake. So if you are a healer, a dreamer, someone who wanted a big life, those would have been very dangerous at one time. And so for thousands of years, women who wanted to experience their power and be creators and leaders as we are, and authors of their own life, we were told it was wrong. That we weren't caring for others, we weren't being generous, and that it would make us unlovable. So I think that's probably the biggest, because even though on a deep cellular level, yes, we do remember when the women were burned, when witches were burned. So if you had a healing gift or a gift of creativity or some kind of magic, say intuition, and most women, although, again, that's maybe dulled, have this ability to connect. It's tied to our connection to nature and to the earth, but we can feel that connection with each other because we know we're not separate from the earth, we're not separate from each other. So there are very, very many ways in family, in history, in culture that it was threatened out of us. So keep yourself small, be always loving and kind and generous. Don't make anyone mad at you, because they might envy you. And here's the thread that you brought about being competitive, because we did learn that also. We learned that not only was it dangerous for us to want a big life and to be creators and to be leaders or healers or actresses for that matter, having some kind of creative role. Not only was it dangerous for us as individuals, but people wouldn't like us. and they would punish us, and they would be envious. So if you value relationship, and most of us women do, because we know that's where it is, that's where the juice is, you would get that kind of envy and hatred coming your way. So we were taught, and it was reinforced. You would feel the sting of that. Now, the whole idea of being competitive comes from the idea that, one, it's wrong for us to be powerful, and two, there's only so much power to go around. So I grew up, you're a lot younger than I am, but I grew up at a time where there were so many limited opportunities for women to work, to get an education, to advance in their careers. It was a rare woman who could do that. My mother didn't find a way at all. She was completely shut down and punished in her family. So she wasn't too happy about me wanting a life of my own. So that made things difficult for quite a long time. But even when I was growing up, it was a rare woman. There was only so much power, so much opportunity. So we learned to be a bit competitive and selfish, which of course was a horrible thing, but I understand it. And I understand it certainly in many particular industries that are male dominated, like corporate life. I think if you were going to succeed there, you had to be a bit like a man or like a father's daughter. It's changing, but not fast enough to my way of thinking anyway. So this is a myth. So we have to kind of unveil these myths that, one, it's dangerous for us to be powerful, and that we cannot be trusted, because there's that too. If you're a powerful woman, you're kind of evil. There's all sorts of legends about that, oh, it's bad, No, it's not. We're really benevolent in our power, because we care about other people, and we care about the living earth and other creatures. So we need to address that myth. And I really want your listeners to take that in, that you can trust yourself and trust your power and trust your creativity. You're not an evil creature. And that story, of course, belonged in the Bible, right? We were taught that, it's evil. Look at Eve. Look what she did. The apple. And that was the beginning of the fall of man. So we have these stories within us, and it makes sense that we'd be scared to use our power and scared to come out and be bigger. And that's okay to be scared, but do it anyway, because we really need you and you need help. And here's the other part that you were talking about with the competition, and can women really come together and help each other and collaborate? And it has been hard for all these reasons. It was so dangerous for us as individuals. And how could you trust that someone wasn't going to chop you down or steal your material or, edge out because there was only one job and there were 50,000 women who would love to have it? Well, that's not quite true anymore. And it's so urgent. I think the call from the earth, it's kind of like listening to the cries of the earth, or the cries of the children, throughout the world. Oh my gosh, you can just choose where you can point your finger at so many places of suffering. And if you're looking for what it is that you're called to do to bring your power and to start getting over these fears, and to let yourself ask for help. That's another myth that we have. We're not supposed to ask for help. We're supposed to be the helpers and be the caretakers. But what about us? We need care. We get vulnerable. We get scared. So turning that myth on its head, that we can only be the great mother all the time. No. A wild woman also knows that she's part of a tribe. So look for your tribe and let the people that you trust help you. And that's a risk-taking thing, but let yourself begin to do it. And you'll see we are so much more powerful when we collaborate. We're so much more creative. And, I just thought of a dream. Can I tell you a dream that I just blogged about that has to do with this?
Definitely. Please do.
Okay. So in this dream that I had, it was after the Women's March. It was maybe a month or two ago. It's a dream about women beginning to break out of hostile environments and find their way to freedom by connecting with nature and connecting with each other. This is how the dream goes, and then I'll come back and comment a little bit. So in the dream, I'm in a hostel. Now, of course, in the dream, it's a hostel, Hostel, the way that you'd spell it if you were traveling and spending time in a fairly inexpensive community place. So I'm in a hostel. I'm traveling in some European country. There are many women in this hostel, and I go into the shower to take a shower, and I notice that there are a couple of inches of inky black water on the floor of this tin-walled rustic shower. And I think, oh, yuck, that's so disgusting. There's inky water and they're not maintaining this. I know it's kind of like a campground, but really they haven't even cleaned the drain. And as I take my shower, I notice washing off of me as well as kind of black inky water, and it pools at my feet. And gradually, as I stand there under the water and the water keeps running, it runs clear. And I've washed all of this inky stuff off of me, and the drain has taken the water down, and it is clear in the drain. Okay, this is better. This is better. And I walk out and I look out the window and I see that there is a beach and the ocean is there visible. And now that I'm all fresh and clean and washed off, I'm thinking, oh, this would be lovely to go down to the beach and take a swim in Mother Ocean. So I walk down to the beach and stand at the water's edge and notice in this wave that's curling over and coming to the sea, this flock of flamingos. You can also call it a flamboyance of flamingos, which is another word for a group of flamingos. And they are surfing in the curl of this wave. Just beautiful and magical. And the dream ends there. Now, there's a lot to say about this dream, and for all of you dreamers, which is everybody, even if you're not remembering many of your dreams, take one and follow an image and get in touch with it. So I followed the image of flamingo because I'd never dreamed about a flamingo before. And this was a whole flock of them surfing in the water. Well, a flamingo is known for being connected to the phoenix. You know that story of the phoenix rising out of the ashes? Mm-hmm. And it's also connected with the heart chakra because of its pink color. So these flamingos, this is a symbol of rebirth and resurrection. And this was not a single flamingo. This was a group of flamingos. So I did a lot more reflection and writing about this group of flamingos and what does that mean for the first part of the dream in this kind of black, inky, disgusting water of the shower. And I thought, oh, well, this is exactly what's happening right now, certainly in the United States, but it is also worldwide. We have been shamed for our wildness, for our creativity, for our power, even for our compassionate and caring hearts, our brave hearts, And that's the ink that was being washed off. And the women before me who had gone in the shower, because it was clear that the shower had been used by all the women staying in the hostel, and this was my turn. But that being washed free of that ink, I thought, well, that's the ink of shame. That's the way, if you watch the news, and don't watch it too much, but if you watch you'll see how many ways women are scorned and despised and shamed for who they are, these beautiful, elegant creatures, So we can wash off our own shame. Don't wait for the system to change, for history to change. We can help each other wash that shame off. To stand proud, because you look at it, back to the flamingos, it's like, oh my goodness, these elegant animals. And they look at how they stand. If you've ever seen them, they stand on one leg, they tuck their heads, they're shapeshifters. They are masters of magic and illusion. And as I said, they come from the heart. And they have this and also they travel as a flock. This is how they move. They love family. They love community. They're very synchronized with each other. And here's one thing about flamingo that I also want your listeners to know is flamingos can do this very unique thing with their beak. They eat upside down. So they have these huge beaks, if you can picture that, huge beak, and it's very hooked it almost looks like it's broken. at the top, but they put their heads upside down and they put their beaks into the mud and the silt of the sand or the mud or whatever, and they filter it. They filter the mud and silt to get just what is nourishing and good for them out. And that's what they swallow. So the message from the flamingo is about your soul food. So this is for you to be careful what it is that you take into your heart and into your body to filter out what is poisonous. The envious friend is a poisonous. You don't want to stay close to her. You don't. You want to be with a tribe, a community of people who absolutely let you be as wild and beautiful and elegant and magical as you have in it you to be. So as the flamingo knows how to sift through and get rid of what is toxic and poisonous, this too is a soul task for us to know what nourishes us, what we need to take in to nourish ourselves, and let the rest go. Let it just go down the drain, wash back into the ocean. So that's some of what I learned about flamingo medicine. But this is how dreams come to me and come to all of us. They bring you something you didn't know about yourself and didn't know about the world, and they ask you to be grateful, yes, but to look a little deeper into the mystery of who you are, because we will never get to the depth of who we are. But there's so much more to us and to our wildness and our wild wisdom, because wild and wisdom kind of go together in my mind.
Yes. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for sharing that beautiful dream. I totally agree with you about the magic and the mystery and the possibilities of dreams. And I love working with my own dreams, and even with, my clients. When we bring the dreams into the work, it's just a whole other experience. It deepens it.
Yes.
And I actually feel that working with dreams, there's like a quickening. It kind of accelerates things, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as I was preparing for our conversation, I actually was really moved by one of the chapters in your book, the chapter called Singing in Tree. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit about the dream that you shared there. And then I was going to ask you some questions about that afterwards.
That would be lovely. Yes.
So you spoke about this dream where, and I'm going to not read the whole thing, but you dreamt that you were in an old, elegant theater, and your mother was standing on the stage waiting for you. And she was holding in her hands copies of sheet music. And I'm just going to read right here where you say, "I stare at the sheet of music, aware that we will be singing a cappella. I vaguely remember we have sung this music for many, many years. There is a faint scent of memory, of nostalgia, like a familiar childhood hymn or nursery rhyme. We've rehearsed this piece so many times, but to my horror, I no longer understand the music or the lyrics. I cannot remember the tune. The words are all in Latin, the language of the church, the priests, the fathers. They no longer make sense." And as the dream continues, you describe looking at the sheets of music and the notes and the lines dissolving, and you're trying to read, but it's fading from sight. And out of this, a faint image begins to arise out of the texture of the paper as part of the fabric, and it becomes a dense wood with large, deep green trees, lush with leaves. And one of the trees grows to fill out the entire page to its edges. And you say, "This is the new song. How am I going to sing in tree?" And I really, when I read this, I felt like, I know this is Marilyn's dream, but it also feels like the dream of women.
Yes. Oh, yes.
In that we've been singing for many, many years the music that we know, the music that was taught, the music that we received love, acceptance for singing. This is what our mothers and fathers, the audience, wants to hear. This is what they're used to.
Yes, exactly.
And it gets harder and harder to sing, and then suddenly it becomes no longer a choice. It's not there for you to sing, and you can't remember it. And then out of this, and I thought this was just amazing. You have this image of the woods and this tree. And so I wanted to ask you to speak to, I guess, the wild feminine in this dream and its connection to the earth, to nature, and how the symbol of the tree is a symbol for the becoming of women, of stepping into their wild feminine.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your beautiful words. That's exactly right. And this was a big dream. This was a big dream that came through me, but of course I didn't make it up. So it was one of those dreams that was a life changer for me, and I was very grateful and awestruck for it. But it came from that deep level that we've been talking about. It really was a gift for me, and as I end that dream, and this was about 30 years ago, so this was one of the trail markers for me, on this path of what my task is, because I was tasked with, oh my gosh, I can see that for myself. I'm no longer able to sing this song that I was taught, and I was taught it in the church, and I was taught it in the school, and I was taught it at home. Oh my gosh, I can no longer. I've come to the end. And so as you so beautifully resonated with that, we come to the end. It's like, oh no, I can no longer sing this song. I can no longer live this life. How am I going to live another kind of life that I have no idea what to do? So when I saw, and this dream is still so vivid, 30 years later to me, when I began to see the image come through the paper, it was not words, it was not lines of music, there was no map to it, and it was part of the pulp of the paper. So one thing that was very clear, it's like this tree is growing out of the paper, they're not separate. So I began to know in myself, it's like, how am I going to sing this song in tree, as tree, with tree kind of coming through me, is how I now understand it. So as a picture, as an image, you can think of any tree that you love, any tree that you can see right now. And we are like trees. Our roots go down deeply into the collective unconscious where we are all connected. So you picture the roots of this tree, the tree that is you. This is your soul self, well, it's all of you, but the roots that go down, and we are connected because these roots spread out. They don't go straight down, they go across. So somewhere deep down is this ancient wisdom that we are like old trees. And I think perhaps the tree in my dream was an oak tree, which connects to goddess spirituality and Celtic tradition. But it doesn't matter. It could be any tree. Anyway, so we're connected in the land of our dreams, which give us so much and mystery and history. And then we come up into the middle realm, where the trunk is. And this is our life on this earth. But we are also connected to the heavens. So just as a tree has branches or blossoms that connect to the sky and is part of the sky, that's us too. If you are a yoga practitioner, anything about energy medicine and chakras, you can think of it in those terms. We've got root chakra down at the bottom, but then we have third eye and crown chakra. And this is the top of the tree, and we're connected to the stars. And we come from the stars. I mean, literally, physically come from stardust. So learning to sing in tree is becoming yourself who is both spirit and soul connected to the heavens, and earth. I mean, really grounded in the earth, but in the roots of so much history and soul. And we have the below and middle and above. This is us becoming ourselves on our soul journeys. And we are connected to each other in the roots of timeless history. And more so now, in the last few years, I've been thinking literally about trees and about the earth and about losing trees. And I'm thinking, well, this is another way that we're being called to sing in tree. We're singing for the earth. The earth is crying through us. Remember when we started talking, I was talking about my beginnings in Hawaii and kind of taking it into my body, that I was the ocean and the earth and the wind and the scented flowers and the animals and all of that. It's like, well, the earth is kind of crying out now, often through our dreams. As you say with the work with your clients, boy, when you have a dream to talk about, you're in the presence of the gods and goddesses, and something is going to quicken, because there's a lot of power for us to draw on there when we have those kinds of messages. It's God speaking to you. God is speaking to you through the dream. So the earth is particularly crying to us now to carry the song for the trees. Trees can't move on their own very much, but we move, we speak, we sing, we communicate, we do radio shows and podcasts, and we get our words written on the page, and we write letters to people. There are all sorts of ways to do it, but singing in tree, I think, means even more, not just your own soul song, which is, I think, the key work. If we all do that, we'll be in a beautiful place, but is also singing for the earth. So singing for the trees, through the trees, because we are like trees. And that was kind of a roundabout, it's such a huge topic, but I hope you did touched enough to bring that alive to you, what I'm learning and what I continue to help women to do to find their song. So it's their individual soul song, that you came to this earth to sing. Yes, it's that. And it's this collective, rooted together song that the earth is calling on us to sing, because she can't do it on her own. We are needed. And we can't just pray to God or the goddesses to do it either. God needs us to take action. So as the dream of singing in tree began kind of with church music, it was kind of Latin. This is the new religion, as I see it too, it's not the religion of tree exactly. That's too narrow, but it is a spirituality that is based in the earth and also connects our soul. So it's healing that separation, but it's very much speaking for the earth through our bodies and using our voice. There's the song.
Marilyn, you describe in your book women as wild cards. Can you speak more about that? I think that's a beautiful metaphor.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. I first heard that phrase, from Terry Tempest Williams, who you may be familiar with, and she's a wonderful nature writer, but she's also a very fierce activist. And she was speaking on behalf to Congress many years before on behalf of the Red Rock land in the land of Utah where she lives. And she said something about learning to be wild cards, because she's not a politician, but she's a beautifully spoken activist on behalf of the earth. So I first heard it from her, and then it came to me, and I did an actual physical deck of wild cards using one of my paintings and using some poetry that I love and that inspires me. So I did it on the physical plane, but more on a psychological and intellectual level. We are wild cards because we're not playing the same game. For many years, you could say 5,000, you could say 200. Anyway, for a really long time, we wild women have been shut out of the game. So the way the cards were dealt, they weren't dealt for us to be in power. We're like that. Oh, and there's a word that I can't use anymore that I used to use when I talked about wild cards. And it starts with a T and a rump. But we are the cards who, when you come into the game, you're not playing the same old game. We're not playing the same political game. We're not playing the same business game. When we go into business, we're doing it from our hearts and we're doing it in relationship. We want to do it in a new way. So we are the surprises. We are the surprises, but our power, and I am going to use the word, but you'll hear why. When we bring our power and creativity and our magic into the game that is being played, we trump everything else. I know how I can use it. Love trumps power, although we are powerful too. So I want to reclaim power. But love, coming from the heart chakra, as the flamingo image, points, coming from the heart chakra, we know about care and compassion and love and connecting. But when we're fierce and powerful from there, that changes every single game, whether you're in academia or politics or economics or your family. Bring what is truest and freest. When you really speak your mind and you speak from the heart of what matters, you're acting as a wild card. And that trumps the old game. That is more powerful than anything that is now on the table. So put your cards on the table and step out. I'm going to refer to flamingo again because they are so bold, aren't they? And so flamboyant and so elegant, so beautiful. It's like, and so tall. Yeah. Like stick your neck out, stand tall, and really fluff your feathers,
Yeah. It's like
we can change everything. I really do believe that on my very best days.
Marilyn, you focus your work, your practice, your book is on primetime women. Can you share why you've chosen that as your focus and a little bit about what a woman might expect to experience if she was working with you?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've kind of grown into a special focus on what I call the primetime woman, and that is a woman that I see as being around 50 or beyond. And before that, the demands of family, if you have one, and certain kinds of career and getting yourself established, those ego, very, very important to do. And a lot of our strength comes from being able to manage that, find your career, find your job, take care of your responsibilities. But as you approach 50, and beyond, there's a creativity and an urgency from your soul that begins to say, you know what, you've taken care of these worldly things. Now I want you to really listen to what your soul needs to do to live. And it may not sound practical at the time or say, but this is your time to focus on that. So some of my early interest in creativity in women came from my academic research at UC Berkeley, a longitudinal study of women and what happened to them around 50 and the creativity that began to surge. And then when I became a Jungian, it's like, oh my gosh, then he talks about the soul urgency that happens at midlife, especially for women who've not been free to do it. And there's really an urgency from inside, maybe from your dreams, maybe from an outside illness or loss or just losing heart in your job. So I thought, well, in the time that I have to focus on this work, I really would like to focus on primetime women who are freer to devote to their own path of power and their own path of spiritual urgency. And I also deliberately, kind of humorously, but deliberately used prime time because there's such a myth in this country, and I think just about every country in the world except a few little bitty indigenous tribes, where the older woman, the elder woman, there's a myth that you're going downhill, you're all burned up, no use for you anymore. And I am saying in my work just the opposite. I'm saying, no, this is the time where you really get to open up, unveil, awaken, expand, and use all of your powers for good. So if you were working with me, and often the women who come to me, I mean, it's so funny. I just have to tell a little story on myself that when I first started thinking about moving, not just from my private practice, but working with women in leadership, I thought, well, I should go into corporations and large organizations, and I can really help them as a coach and a consultant because I have all of this knowledge of what's missing, what's missing in leadership and how to bring it to life. And I started going to these conferences and networking events and groups, and oh my gosh, everyone I met who wanted to talk to me about this was fleeing from corporate. They were running in the other direction with their hair on fire. It's like, let me out of here. I'm dying here, So after about 3 years, I realized, you know what? That's not a useful place for me to be. I need to work with the women who are running out screaming, that their souls have shriveled and their hearts are dying, or they've developed multiple sclerosis or divorce or just burnout, and they need to come to life again. It's like, okay, I know how to help you come alive again. So for the women who are beginning to feel this around 50, I want to say this is the beginning of, and I know you're not that old yet, but you could look forward to this. Not only is your life not over, this is the beginning, I promise you, can be the beginning of the most spiritually and creatively rewarding time of your life, where you get to be a wild card in your own life. You say, you know what? For whatever reason, you may be completely flattened. I find that, if you've lost everything and you've gone through a complete wipeout and burnout, that's actually a really good time to start reinventing yourself, because you kind of lost all the things that were holding you to the old story or the old song. And now you're free. It's like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
Tell me, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life now that you're freed, whether you like it or not, to do it? So I try to help women who come to me. We work with your dreams. We work with your thoughts. I have I have courses, and I have a retreat that I do, and we kind of go around the 7 directions. It's partly an indigenous, also Jungian, also goddess-based, it's got a lot to all the directions of your life, and begin to get in touch with, where's your fire? Where are you grounded? What makes you happy to come alive? What helps you come alive? So we're looking for your new aliveness, and beginning to trust that and strengthen that. Comes from your intuition, comes from synchronicities that happen out in the outer world with strange people you run into, or books that speak to you, and we definitely work with dreams a lot to begin to let you be the creator and author of this new chapter. And that's where you're going to find your wild wisdom, is really listening to your heart about what makes you happy. So it's a different way of defining success. It's redefining power. It's a different kind of power. It's a feminine power. And revisioning success. It's not the old game, and it's not the old song. So for you to do that, and in the process, you will be reclaiming joy.
Wow, Marilyn, what a gift that you are giving to women in the world. I feel that, probably for women who work with you, it's just such a healing experience to be able to work with you. And I'm really excited for those who will be listening to this podcast and who will be drawn to your work. I'm just like speechless. It's just amazing.
Oh,
yeah. I just really.
Well, you're an angel. Thank you so much for those words and this opportunity.
You're so
really
welcome.
Precious.
You're so welcome. I just, as I'm listening to you describe this, I feel inspired, excited. Things just connect. So you're able to describe this process, I think, in a way that, again, women can look forward to this as a rebirth and an expansion of the possibilities, and being able to sing new songs and let the other ones go. Well, you actually have no choice; they're gone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Often that's the way it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to come to a dead end often before we can. But however it comes, yes, singing new songs. Beautifully put. Thank you.
So, Marilyn, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the podcast and to share your deep wisdom with our listeners. I know that this is going to resonate with so many. So thank you so much.
You're so very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I almost forgot, because I was so caught up in just everything that you were sharing. Can you share the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, to find out more about your work, and to explore any of the services and resources that you have?
Oh, yes. Thank you for remembering. I had forgotten too. So please get in touch with me through my website, which is www.thewildfeminine.com. So that's all 3 words together. The, wild, WILD, feminine, FEMININE.com. And you can also email me. I'd be happy to hear from you via an email. drmsteele@gmail.com. There are no caps. It's just DRM as in Marilyn, Steele, S as in Sunny, TEELE @gmail.com. And I'd be delighted to hear from you.
And we will put all of that information in the show notes, Marilyn, so that listeners can get in touch with you.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. It was wonderful connecting with you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Marilyn. There was so much wisdom that it's very hard to choose just a few things to highlight. But two of the things that grabbed my attention were the invitation for women, for all of us to reflect upon where and how we get shut down, and for women to be discerning of their soul food. What feeds you? What are you taking in? How do you nourish yourself? And really reflecting upon the question from the Mary Oliver poem, what will I do with my one wild and precious life? And I am really, really excited about this part, especially for those of you who have listened this far into the interview. Marilyn is gifting 14 lucky listeners with a gift of either a deck of her wild cards, which are a deck of 27 cards that she created that contain images and quotations to inspire your creativity, awaken your wild feminine power, and nourish your soul, or a free half-hour dream consultation with Marilyn. And the consultation can be done via Skype, via telephone, or if you're in the Bay Area in California, you can do this in person. So if you would like to enter into the drawing to be one of those 14 women who can choose one of those gifts, and she'll be giving away 7 decks and 7 30-minute readings, please visit www.lourdesviado.com/women-in-depth, where you will find the show notes for today's episode, along with links to the resources mentioned and the links to Marilyn's website where you can enter this drawing. Again, it's an amazing offer, and I am really excited for the 14 of you who will be gifted with these amazing resources. And finally, I just want to tell you thank you so much for listening to the podcast, for supporting it, for sharing it. In this day and age, I know there's so much calling for our attention, and for you to take the time to listen is truly appreciated. So thank you with all my heart, and see you next time.